Welcome to Policy Matters, a show of the Fort Wayne Area League of Women Voters. I'm Nancy McCammon Hansen. I am the convener of the local league. And with me today I have two members of the Northeast Indiana Friends of Public Education. And we're going to be talking a little bit about some basics of education in the state of Indiana and what you as a voter need to know. So I'm going to ask you both to introduce yourselves. Kathy, first of all.
I'm Kathy Candioto. I've lived in Fort Wayne for 18 years. I'm a retired teacher, a mother, a grandmother, a wife. I joined our group, Northeast Indiana Friends of Public Education, when we first began, probably back in 2011. And we're a very strong group, and I'm very proud to be a member.
Okay, Anne?
I am a Fort Wayne resident, and my children attend Fort Wayne Community Schools. I also serve on the school board for Fort Wayne Community Schools. I am also a former educator and was a guidance counselor, most recently at Northside High School, and I left that position in 2005 to stay home with my children. I have been with Northeast Indiana Friends of Public Education for almost 6 years now, and will continue to advocate for our public schools.
Okay, and Anne is Ann Duff.
Ann Duff.
Who is also on the Fort Wayne Community Schools School Board.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. I want to start, we're going to define some things first for those of you who are listening so that you have just some basic background on terms that have to do with education. So first of all, would one of you please define what a charter school is?
Well, a charter school is an independently run public school. They are public schools, but the intent of charter schools was to be more innovative than your traditional schools, have greater flexibility than a public school would. But they are run by charter management groups. So some of those management groups may be private. So some of these charter schools there may be a profit for someone involved somewhere. But again, they are publicly funded, although they would not receive the capital funds like for transportation and for buildings like our building improvements like our public schools do.
Now, I remember when I was first moved to town in 2006, I went to work for the YWCA, which was over on Wells Street at the time, and that campus was sold to Imagine Schools. And that's when I first heard of charter schools. I came from Nebraska, I'd never heard charter schools before, but charter schools are not necessarily a new thing.
No, they've been around for quite a while. They came to Indiana, though, about around that time. And again, the quality of a charter school is questionable. Some are very well run. Some are innovative as they are supposed to be, but others, not so good. We don't, since they are a public school, they should accept all students, but do they hold to that or not? There are a lot of questions about charter schools that we have that we aren't sure if they truly follow the public school's intent in admitting all students, and are they using innovation to form their curriculum and use different methods that public schools don't. There's good charter schools and there's bad charter schools.
Okay, so what is a magnet school?
I was going to say something else about charter schools.
That's fine.
If you would like to form a charter school, one example would be the Urban League. The Fort Wayne Urban League decided they would like to form a charter school, and their school is Thurgood Marshall. Then they would have to go through the state of Indiana. There is a charter school board in the state, and they have to okay that charter school, so to speak. And then you have to get a private company, usually, to operate that school. Their private company at Thurgood Marshall, I believe, is American Quality Schools. But that company then would make money, tax dollar money, for running that school. And that's why sometimes charter schools are a little unfair, because they're for profit. The company that operates them is making money.
Okay, so then we hear about magnet schools. What is a magnet school?
Fort Wayne Community Schools has several magnet schools. A magnet school offers a certain curriculum or a certain program that's usually not a traditional program, that focuses on a certain aspect, has a certain way to teach. For example, we have a communications magnet where students produce the news, a video show, things like that. We have, that is at Kroninger. I didn't either. I didn't realize that's what type of magnet it was. But yes, I visited there and I saw their production studio. And
which school?
That is Kroninger.
Huh.
Yeah, and then we have a Montessori Magnet in Fort Wayne. We have the Arts Magnet, Whitney Young and Weiser Park. Math and Science Magnet at Irwin, New Tech Magnet, that's also at Tolles and Wayne. And so for a magnet school within Fort Wayne Community Schools anyway, to get into a magnet school, which these schools are, throughout the city, the students must enter a lottery. And so their name is, picked at random as to whether they can attend that school or not.
Do they have to have a special talent, skill, in, say, math or something?
No. There are no prerequisites to attend a magnet school. They're open to everybody, but it's based on the lottery, whether you get lucky or not in that lottery.
Okay. Now, the one at Tolles, New Tech, or at Tolles, it's a Montessori school, and that's considered a magnet school?
Yes. Bunch and Tolles are age 3 through age 12. That's the Montessori Magnet. And then it's also housed at Tolles, this building Tolles, the New Tech Magnet for 7th and 8th graders.
Okay, which I've worked a little bit with them when I was at the History Center. They combined English and history classes, which was awesome.
Yes, you see that a lot in New Tech. English and biology, CAM and geometry, which makes perfect sense. So, yeah, that is something special about the New Tech program, as well as the project-based learning component.
Right. Okay, so we have charter schools, we have magnet schools. What are school vouchers?
A school voucher is based on the Choice Scholarship Program in Indiana, which started in 2011. And essentially, you get a certain amount of money based on your income to go to a private school or a parochial school. In Fort Wayne, it's the majority of schools that accept vouchers are parochial schools. Vouchers have increased greatly, the use of vouchers, since 2011. Last year, at the end of last year's school year, we had spent $154 million in the state of Indiana for vouchers. Now that money is taken out of the tuition reserve fund or the education pot. There is no special pot line item for vouchers. You just start with a certain amount of money that goes to all the schools, and vouchers come out of that. There is no limit to vouchers. There is no limit to the number of vouchers that are awarded, or no limit to the money. And the thing you must remember when you think about vouchers is that that is money that should have gone to the public schools.
So our public schools are funded by tax dollars?
Correct.
Yes.
Property taxes or a variety of
both?
taxes?
Combination,
okay. So if I had a child that got a school voucher, that voucher was paid for with tax dollars?
That is correct.
Okay. So if vouchers are a way of giving parents and students an opportunity for choice, how do the options that Fort Wayne Community Schools provide fit in with that train of thought? Because you get choice if you...
Correct, yes.
Community school student too, right?
Let me before I answer that, let me add on to what Kathy talked about. In order to receive a voucher, the original intent of the voucher was to give people in poverty a fair chance, or a chance at going to a private school, and they had income limits. You could make $32,000 would be the max you can make, and you would receive 90% of your tuition at a private school. And then I believe that's correct. My numbers are there. Do you know the one for 50%? Do you have that?
I know that today 20% of the voucher recipients came from households earning more than $75,000 a year. Now, that has greatly increased. When they started in 2011, that income level was, I don't know, 50,
now you can make $46,000 a year, a family of four, and get 90% of your tuition paid for. And $92,000 is what a family of four can make and still get 50% of their tuition covered. So instead of helping the poor, it has now become a middle-class entitlement.
Yeah.
Okay. But Fort Wayne Community Schools is not without options.
Correct. Right. So back to your original question. Fort Wayne Community Schools is, we call ourselves a school district of choice. So for example, we have chosen not to go to our neighborhood school. I live clear on the south side of Fort Wayne, but my children chose to go to Snyder High School. So with that, though, of course, with that choice that we made, we had to lottery in. We weren't guaranteed a spot there, but we lotteried in at a good time, and we were able to get in. But I do have to take my kids to school. We especially with the transportation cuts, we can no longer receive bus transportation. So when you do make those choices, magnet schools, you will get transportation. But if you just choose a school just because you want to go there, like we did, then you have to provide your own transportation within this district. But you can choose any school within Fort Wayne Community Schools, even if that's not your neighborhood school. And it's lottery, once again. But you can go to any school of your choice as long as they have room and you can get in.
Okay, now is that true for middle school and elementary school?
Any school, any age. And it is also, even throughout the state of Indiana, I can choose a different school corporation, but if I want to, and not have to pay any additional costs as long as they have room. But each school corporation has to decide that they will either accept, if they have room, they will accept all students that apply to their school, or they will accept no students at all, only the students who live within their boundaries. And that eliminates cherry picking of students. But so a lot of the schools are open to other students from outside the district. Fort Wayne Community Schools, for example, is one of those schools that will accept any student, whether they live in the Fort Wayne Community School boundaries or not. We will accept them if we have room.
Okay. I read an article recently that talked about the opinion of the author, who said that tax dollars paying for parochial school is a violation of the separation of church and state. And I had not ever heard that argument before. I think that's interesting. How do you two feel about that? Because Kathy, didn't you teach in a parochial school?
Oh, yes. But the Supreme Court found 2004, maybe, the United States Supreme Court, it was a case involving the city of Cleveland and their use of vouchers, and was that constitutionally acceptable. And they found the same as later on, 2014, maybe, Indiana Supreme Court found that the money is given to the parent, and the parent makes the choice. So therefore, it is constitutional in their eyes. That's why we're the largest voucher expansion program in the nation. Indiana has the largest voucher usage. Our state constitution okayed it.
Okay. Now, a private school does not have to, as I understand it, report back to the state, but a private school, who oversees it?
You want to do that?
Who does oversee it?
No one.
Right. They do not have the audits like what public schools do. They do not have to show how that money is used. So we don't really know how those voucher dollars are used. Are they spent for the education of children, or are they spent in other ways in that
to
that
improve
church.
the church or improve the
parking
school or
lots.
Right.
So if I'm a student at a private school that has not had oversight by the state, and I decide to go to a public university, that's where I want to go, does that affect my ability to get into?
No, usually the private schools do follow, they offer the same types of diplomas, the academic honors and the Core 40 and that type of thing, and they're accredited by the state. So as far as that goes, that's usually not an issue. But what they don't have to do is everything that they have to follow the same accountability. That means they have to take, if they do accept vouchers, they have to take the I-STEP test or whatever the test of the day is. They have to take the test. They have to have that letter grade. But as far as like licensed teachers, different things like that, those rules are different than
So if a student
public.
has demonstrated that they have the ability to go to college, it's more, it has less to do with that. I'm not explaining this well. The fact that the school that no one is overseeing where the money goes is
Right.
not a factor in
Right.
whether or not
Yeah.
a private school.
That does not impact,
Because
a student going on to college at
the
all.
voucher student is a student at Bishop Twanger. You know, that voucher student is the same as all the other students. It's the fact that that voucher student, the money that pays for his tuition, part of that money came from the state. We are not allowed to go in and make sure that $4,000 or $5,000 that helped pay for his tuition was truly used to pay for his tuition.
Nor that do private schools have open board meetings like for community schools. You know, we are very open. Our board meetings are always public. Our work sessions are always public. The public is welcome to come. Then we broadcast them live, our board meetings live. Then they are the videotapes on the website right now. But we don't know what they are doing at board meetings in private schools, even though they are using our public tax dollars.
Okay. Now, I understand that a private or a parochial school can deny entry to any student that they wish. Is that correct?
Yes.
So how does that impact public schools then?
Public schools accept all students. It doesn't matter what their income is. It doesn't matter their race, their sexual orientation, their behavior, how smart they are, what kind of issues they have academically, behaviorally, emotionally. Public schools accept all students. So sometimes what happens when a private school does accept a student and after a couple of months realize that, wow, this kid is not going to pass I-STEP, this kid is going to bring down our letter grade, this kid is causing trouble or whatever it may be, they can send that child back to the public schools, who then has to educate that child. And if it is past count date, we educate that child with the same money that we started with. We don't get additional money to educate that child. The private school keeps that voucher money.
Do you have any feel for how often that happens? I'm throwing you a curveball here. So.
I'm sure there's at least a handful of kids a day. Not a day, I'm sorry, a handful of kids a year. It could be more, it could be less. But we do see students come back from charter schools, from private schools. Some have made the comment, I didn't know this was a religious school, thinking, wow, I get to go to a private school and I'm going to get to go for free, and don't realize what it all entails. We've had students come to us from charter schools that we had to get caught up to what we were doing in that grade level at our public schools, because the charter schools were so far behind our schools. So it certainly does have an impact on us. Another comment I heard from an administrator was, this kid during the middle of the year was transferring from the private school to a public school, and so our public school called the administrator at the private school and to ask about the student, and the private school administrators just said, well, he's just not our kind of kid. And a public school can't say that. Everybody is our kind of kid.
Okay. Kathy, you look like you want to say something.
No, I was just echoing Ann in that a lot of students find that they are personally not comfortable in that private school environment for whatever reason.
Okay.
Because whatever religion they are, they must practice along with the other children. They must go to Mass in a Catholic school. They're expected to do what the other students do, and they may not be comfortable with that.
Yeah, and it is interesting to see some of these kids maneuver through the different schools, the different private schools, and they're back to public schools. We have one of my son's friends started at a Lutheran private school. Well, actually started in public schools, then they decided to go to the Lutheran public school, tried that, but then for high school decided to go to Catholic school. So I guess they were just trying it all out.
We had, just for those of you who are listening, we met together a few weeks ago before we're taping the show so that we could kind of talk through some of these things. And one of the things we got to talking about was how school has changed since
right.
we have all been in school, and I'm guessing I might be the oldest person in the room right now. So
yeah. No, I mean, not yet.
Maybe not.
I wasn't agreeing with that.
Point on that.
But
anyway, can you tell us, from your perspective as teachers and a guidance counselor, for somebody who, I graduated from high school in 1970, okay, there's my age. How has school changed over the last, 40
I just visited one of our middle schools the other day, so it's, still fresh in my brain. But when I went to school, we basically sat in rows and we listened to the teacher, and then we did our work. And sometimes like one teacher would have kind of a U shape. That was in English, so we could have some conversations and things like that. But it was basically, here's your lesson. I'm going to teach you this for 45 minutes, and then you might have a couple minutes to do your homework. And it was basically the same setup. But now when you go into a school, I went to Kikianga Middle School just on Monday, and not once did I see a teacher at the front of the classroom teaching to the class. These kids were in small groups. They were working with each other. Some of them were working on different assignments. They were working on assignments that were at their certain reading level. Some had different lexiles. Some had a worksheet that was at their very high lexile, where others had one that was at their lower lexile. I saw sometimes there were two adults in that classroom, and one was working with a small group while one was working one-on-one with students. So it's just much different. A lot of cooperative learning, a lot of project-based learning, so much different than what we did. And what I remember when I was in school, I never understood how does what you're teaching me relate to the real world. It never clicked. I don't know if it didn't click or they just weren't telling me how it related to the real world. They just wanted me to get through those math problems and that geometry or whatever. But now there's just so many different types of manipulatives and real world examples and things like that the kids seem, have a much better understanding of why they are doing this, not just because this is what the teacher's making you do, but they understand how this relates to the real world and real world problems.
Would you define manipulatives?
Well, for example, last week I went to Portage Middle School, and they were using Legos to show area and perimeter and volume. And it was, I was laughing at myself because I know how to find all those things if you give me the numbers and I can plug it in. But I had a difficulty with the manipulatives because I just couldn't visualize it because that wasn't, that wasn't the way I learned it. So I, raised my hand. Could you come help me, Mr. Principal? Because I'm a little lost. I'm not as smart as a fifth grader. So that's what I mean by manipulatives. You see them using various tools to demonstrate what they are learning.
So, in other words, more so now than when we were all in school, they are trying to teach the same thing different ways to appeal to different kinds of intelligence.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay, and for those of you who don't know, there are like 10 or 12 different kinds of intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
There's people who are good with words, people who are good with math, science. There are people who are really good at intuition and reading people who are musically intelligent. I mean, it's really fascinating, and ultimately we're all intelligent, but school when a lot of us went to school, didn't teach to that.
Right, and that also reminds me too that you said, you talked about the different intelligences. Well, also what I saw was students would get a choice instead of saying, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to draw this picture. It's going to look like this. You're going to put this on the left side, this on the right side. That's how we were taught. Everybody's whatever they made looked the same. Now it's like we have a choice. You can write a rap song about the metric system, or you can do this, and that, or you can draw. Not everybody's a good artist, or you can do a PowerPoint. So you don't have to use any drawing or art skills or something like that. There's choice now that hits on the skills of the student instead of making everybody do the same thing or everybody drawing. Well, if I'm not an artist, why should I have to draw a picture to illustrate? So
I think we talked before about seasoned teachers. I was in the classroom for 30 years, but I don't substitute anymore. I couldn't keep up with all of the different smart boards, etc., that they have, and the way they set up the class, because I was very traditional in my teaching. The teaching is better now. English.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember English was pretty rote.
Yeah.
So in your estimation, and keeping in mind that you're interested in public education, do you think public schools are failing us?
Absolutely not.
I'm going to say that if you look at the NAEP statistics, that's the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is given every year in schools across the nation to 4th and 8th graders, and then off years seniors also take the test. In the Fort Wayne community, maybe they would test 2 elementary schools this year. Next year they might test 3 elementary schools, different elementary schools in the area. So, and they test all students in all schools, private, Amish, and public. But the scores in Indiana have slowly and steadily been increasing in reading and math in 4th and 8th grade.
And you can say the same about our graduation rate, about our I-STEP, or whatever, like I said, test of the day is, because, the rate of going to college, all of that has improved. If you do the research, you'll see that there has been improvement, lots of improvement in the last 20 years. But what our failing schools, that's the rhetoric our politicians want you to hear, corporate reformists want you to hear, because if we can say that public schools are failing, that gives them then a good reason to privatize, and that's what a lot of people want to do. A lot of politicians or people with money interests want to do is privatize our education system.
So at this point in time, in 2018, what do you think the biggest takeaway regarding our schools in Indiana is at this point?
I think that they're stronger than ever, and we just stated that. But we need to keep paying attention. As taxpayers, you want to know what is happening in your public schools, because again, the children who graduate from these schools are our future. It's important to pay attention. Right now, we're in the midst of these graduation pathways, which will affect, I believe, the class of 2023, when the graduating class of 2023. So they need to start now in this new, supposedly great way to increase the workforce and increase the abilities of those going out into the workforce, changing the accountability exams, which I think is horrendous. Right now, it looks like every student will take the SAT. I don't think that's educationally sound whatsoever. I've said this over and over that somewhere between 20 to 30% of the jobs require a 4-year degree or higher. So therefore, why are we making 100% of the kids who shouldn't be going to a 4-year, we don't want 100% of our students going to a 4-year college, because there aren't jobs for that many people. So why are we making them take an SAT test? And they're not necessarily taking that to see if they can graduate. They're taking it just so we can grade our schools, so we can give our schools an A, B, C, D, or F.
Who's going to pay for that?
Taxpayers?
That's a good question. Yeah, most likely it's going to be taxpayers. Right now, we don't even know the answer to that question. We don't even know for sure if this is the SAT. There's a lot of questions right now that are unanswered as far as the specific details of these graduation pathways. What tests will be given to high school students, the accountability, the grading system, how will our schools be graded? Because right now they're thinking, well, we're not going to count growth anymore at the high school level. It's just whether you hit the benchmark or not. So there's a lot of unanswered questions right now in public education.
The thing that worries me most is the fact that we have a legislature who strongly supports privatization and probably will never back down on its use of vouchers. We hoping maybe to slow it down or put it at a moratorium and say, let's look at what we're doing here for a few years before we continue to give out this money. And then all of those things that Ann was talking about, all of those changes came from our State Board of Education. And even though they had many hearings on these pathways and these different ways to graduate in different tests, and the people who came to the hearings were not in favor of this at all, they still seem to be going ahead with it. So it's really our elected officials that worry me in what they're doing to our schools. Are we done?
No. Okay. Moving along. So we talked before about vouchers and students starting a private school and then maybe switching over in the middle of the year to a public school, but the money does not follow.
Correct.
The student. Can you give us some example, or do you know how much how that has affected Fort Wayne Community Schools in the last few years?
Yes. For example, let's say Fort Wayne Community Schools in 1 year would lose 100 students to vouchers. 100 students, when you have 50 buildings, doesn't constitute for eliminating 4 teachers. So when those students leave, we lose that money for those students, about $6,000 per kid, $600,000 a year that year, but we still have the same expenses. We still have to pay for the same custodians, the same heat, light, air conditioning, same amount of teachers. So we are truly affected by students leaving our school and going to a private school on a voucher. But I must say, fortunately, this year we actually had an increase in attendance. So I think that says something about public schools. They, like we mentioned before, they are strong. They are still going strong, and people are seeing the value of Fort Wayne Community Schools and other public schools as well.
Okay. Fort Wayne Community Schools is the largest school district in the state. Is that correct?
Yes,
It
usually
goes back and forth between Indy and us.
Okay, alrighty. How many students, teachers, and schools are in Fort Wayne Community Schools?
we have about 1,800 teachers and approximately 50 schools and about 30,000 students.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So, and in this area also, then we also have Southwest Allen, Northwest Allen, and East Allen.
Correct. That is all the county schools.
That's a lot of schools, teachers, and students in one area, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
So, if legislation is passed that says the school has to do X, okay, and it's beautiful for a school like in Jasper, Indiana, small community, southern part of the state, but it's not going to work in as large a school district as Fort Wayne. Do the school districts have the option to, I don't want to say play around with, but to adjust to take legislation and adjust it to the size of their school district?
It probably depends on the legislation.
Yes, well, I was going to say the accountability, how you use your I-STEP, how you use your teacher salary. Schools can, in order to get your letter grade, schools can opt to not base the teacher's salary on the letter grade. A certain school district can do that. I know that. So I think with those rules, as far as grading your school, different school districts can use different parts of that rule. It has to be okayed by the state, but there is some leeway there.
Okay, so teacher salaries are based upon how well the students do.
Yes,
Part of it is.
not the
right.
entire.
Sometimes it's 20% of their rating, the teacher's evaluation, but you don't have to use 20%. Like she said, that's up to each school district. So I can put 2% of the ISTEP scores in my teacher's evaluation. But a teacher can only receive additional salary, if they are highly effective or an effective teacher. If they would receive the two below that
to improve, yeah,
at the two lower ratings, then they cannot receive a raise whatsoever.
So, for example, when my student taught back in the day in 1974, I was student teaching in a larger school district in Nebraska, and I was student teaching in history and journalism. But in the two history classes that I taught in, the teacher had he had to be creative in that he had some low ability learners in the class and some really high ability learners in the class. So he couldn't just stand up in front of the class and lecture. He knew it wasn't going to work. So he started the small group things where the kids kind of, on some levels, taught themselves. So if you're a teacher in a school district where you have, say, a group of students that are really wide apart in their ability to learn and to process information and communicate, to judge a teacher's performance based upon the students would not necessarily be fair.
Doesn't sound fair, does it?
Not fair.
Because it wouldn't be reflective maybe of the work that they've done, because
right.
if the students' grades are still coming up and they're doing better, but they're not A students.
Or they're not doing well on the I-STEP.
Right.
Or you've chosen to be a special ed teacher, or you've chosen to teach those students who aren't the honors kids, does that affect your evaluation, because the kids you've chosen might not pass that test?
Well, and you're going to have kids, obviously even a good student is not going to be great at everything.
Right.
I mean, like for me, if a music teacher was being paid based upon how good a musician I am, he'd be in serious trouble. And my former piano teacher would tell you that. But I guess to me it seems odd to base teacher salaries on
The performance of their students.
Yeah, because there are a lot of factors that go into that. It's their home environment, their parents.
Correct.
All those. But a school system can't give parents a letter grade on how good a parent they are.
Right,
No.
right. And it really impacts foreign community schools, because we are such a high poverty school district that we do have kids with lots of issues that some of the smaller schools and smaller communities don't have. So we see all kinds of kids, but we accept all these kind of kids and we do the best we can, and we do have excellent teachers who help with that.
Okay, so at this point in my life, my son is 33 and out of school. Why should I care about education in Indiana?
Oh, that's a question that we all hear, don't we, when property taxes go up. I think you have to be of the mind that public schools are for the whole country. They're for all of us. They're the great equalizer. The stronger our public schools, the stronger our community. Communities are sometimes rated on the strength of their public schools. And in order to have that strength in our public schools, all of us have to be involved. So the door doesn't shut when your children are finished. You're still part of the community. And we need the support of everybody in the community to strengthen our schools.
Now, Ann, you're on the school board. Why should, because you and I are neighbors, sort of, why should I care about Fort Wayne Community Schools?
It's the same as Kathy said. They are the future of the community. They are part of your community. these children going to these schools are our future workforce, our future leaders. So if you want a strong workforce, you want strong leaders, then you want strong public schools, and you want to be supportive of those. So we are very transparent with how we spend that money, and as a taxpayer, you can look on our website and find out what our budget is, how your tax dollars are being spent. You can speak up at board meetings. We have public hearings when we do our budget. So as a taxpayer whose money is going to a public school, even though you may not have children in that school, you have the right to speak up, to listen to what's going on, to see what's happening. Strong schools are very important to keep our communities strong.
How often does the average citizen get involved with the schools?
That is a good question.
What kind of attendance do you have at school board meetings?
Recently, it's been pretty high, but normally it's not that many people. We have like one fan who's there every meeting, but recently, because of these graduation pathways and the SAT test being the accountability test, possibly for our high school students, our parents have become very aware of what is happening and who is making these things happening. Our state board of education and our state legislators are the ones implementing these things. A lot of people don't realize, they think that it's all the choice of Fort Wayne Community Schools. It's not the choice of Fort Wayne Community Schools. We have to do as our legislators tell us, as the State Board of Ed tells us, the rules that they implement, we have to follow. And sometimes the changes we make aren't always the best, or not what our parents want to hear, but it's what we have to do to keep up with the changes at the state level and to follow the legislation that's being written.
I think a good example is a couple years ago, maybe 2, we didn't have enough funds for buses.
Correct.
And so if you lived within a mile
for elementary school, you had to walk.
You had to walk to school, and Fort Wayne Community Schools was blamed for that. People were angry about that, but it was really the constitutional amendment, the cap on property taxes that had gone into effect maybe 5-6 years ago, that kind of has taken a lot of money away from our schools, and so the money came out of the busing. But it wasn't Fort Wayne Community Schools that said this is the way it is. It was the legislature.
Right. We weren't mismanaging our funds. We were getting less and less money from the state, so therefore we had to make the changes so that we wouldn't be in trouble in 10 years down the road.
I'm going to throw you both a question that we didn't talk about before, but it just popped into my head. What role does the business community have in helping public schools to be successful?
I think we have partnerships with a lot of our businesses, especially I know within New Tech. We have a lot, at New Tech, the format is a lot of project-based learning. So the kids get a real-life situation. One that they've done several times is for like downtown improvement and things like that. And so they will have people in the business, sometimes in businesses, come and facilitate discussion within their groups and help them get ideas of what they can do. And then they will also have people from the business community come in and judge their projects. They have to do presentations in front of adults, in front of the business community. So there are great partnerships that we have within our schools with the hospitals, with different businesses, government agencies. So they have truly helped us in developing our students to be successful down the road.
One specific example I know is the Downtown Rotary Club and their partnership with Washington Elementary on Jefferson Boulevard. Yeah,
between Jefferson.
Right.
Correct.
And that's been going on for a while, and they're great help to that school. They have a great partnership. But on the negative side, sometimes I think that the business community has too much sway on the recommendations of courses that children will take. They see what they want the end product to be. But I think they put pressure on the State Board of Education to change these pathways.
Right.
To make
yes.
a change on these pathways.
A lot of the pathway
Right.
suggestions, we believe, came from the Indiana State Chamber and what
of
they
Commerce.
see.
Right.
And not being educators themselves, don't realize that this is, some of their suggestions aren't necessarily
Doable.
right or academically sound.
So do you think that are they looking more toward, we need trained workers
Yes.
who can do X, Y, Z,
Yes.
not we need educated citizens who can think for themselves? And
Right. That's pretty much what their
Well, I think
thinking
it's
is.
a combination, but they do want more trained workers, coming out as a senior.
okay. And as we become more and more computerized, I can see that continuing. So as a parent, how can I be a positive part of my child's education?
One thing you can do is constantly be in contact with your teacher, your child's teacher. Be aware who that teacher is. If he or she likes to communicate through email, do so. Normally phone calls don't work very much, but let the teacher know that you know what your child's doing at home, and sometimes you may want to help that child and you're not getting enough information from the teacher. I just think that constant communication is necessary.
And I would also suggest joining your school's PTA, getting involved in your school and know what's going on in your school. Get to know the other parents. That's always a great way to get ideas and get involved. Just to find out that, wow, my child does the same as your child, and just to see that, there's those similarities and not everybody's facing this all by themselves and their kid's the only one doing this. Just getting involved with other parents. You can do that through PTA for volunteering at your school. Read to your child. Monitor homework. Make sure your child has a place to do their homework, a certain place to sit and study, read, quiet place for them. Monitor. Make sure your child's actually working when they're supposed to be working. Make sure you got the supplies you need at home for your child. Just staying involved, staying on top of what's going on in your child's school is helpful.
And from experience, I can tell you that being involved with your children's school can be very interesting, because I got to go to George W. Bush's inauguration because I was a band booster parent.
Wow.
26
Great.
hours on the bus one way to Washington, D.C., but I'd never been there before, and on Inauguration Day, it was phenomenal. Everyone should be in D.C. on Inauguration Day. So, and you can learn some things as an adult, because if your child has different interests than you, like our son was really interested in animals, and I didn't really care, but I learned an awful lot because of his interests.
Right, exactly. And yeah, take pride in their interests instead of saying, I'm not interested in that, so you shouldn't be either. But yeah, accept what they are interested in and learn for yourself.
I think some parents, it's very difficult. They may have 2 jobs. They barely have enough time to get breakfast and dinner for their children.
That's true.
But I think the main thing that they need to do is know what's going on in school, monitor their homework, make them talk to you, even, how was school today? Fine. Go further than that. And at least know the teacher enough to email her and she recognizes your name. Oh, that's John's mom, or something like that. Just do the best you can to keep contact up.
And your child and the teacher will appreciate that you're taking that interest.
Yeah. And just to give some kudos to the Allen County Public Library System, which is where we are taping this show, Fort Wayne has just an incredible library system, and so many programs and things to do that don't cost you a dime other than your taxes going to the library. So do take advantage of the public library, and also things like the zoo and the art museum and the history center and the conservatory and all those different things that actually are fairly cost effective to go visit, because they do have free days also. So get out of the house and go do some things with your kids. Anything else you two would like to add before we get into some final wrapping up of some other things going on with education?
I wanted to make sure that people were aware, if you get the Sunday papers. Last Sunday, Dr. Phil Downs, who's the superintendent of Southwest Allen Schools, had an article on vouchers. And in that article, he has a chart which shows you that even if your particular school doesn't lose actual children to vouchers, you are still losing money in that school, because, as I said before, the money comes out of the pot that's made for everybody. And he breaks down specifically the counties in Northeast Indiana and how much they've lost to vouchers, how much more money they would have for their school if we did not have vouchers.
And yes, and he did an excellent job. I would say, too, the Journal-Gazette has been really good about
very supportive.
Discussing education issues. You likely can go back on their website and go through many of the editorials and opinion pieces that they've had on education, which are very good. Now, there's an event coming up on April 14th, and you want to give us some details about that?
Correct. Northeast Indiana Friends of Public Education has partnered with the Indiana State Teachers Association, and we will be showing Backpack Full of Cash. It is a ticketed movie, although it is free, and it basically talks about education reform and the impact it is having on our different state education systems, and the corporate reform movement, privatization, how this impacts our public schools, how it impacts teachers, students. It is a very informative film, narrated by Matt Damon, and the breakfast starts at 8:30. The film will start at 9 o'clock. It is at Ivy Tech, and then after the film, we will have a panel discussion with Karen Francisco from the Journal-Gazette, Representative Melanie Wright. She is an educator
and a
legislator. Pastor Jason Morris and Dr. Pat O'Connor, who is the superintendent of Whitley County Consolidated Schools. So it should be a great event. If you are interested in tickets, you can go to Eventbrite and just search for Backpack Full of Cash, eventbrite.com, search for Backpack Full of Cash, and you can get your free ticket there. It is April 14th. That is a Saturday, 8:30 a.m. Movie starts at 9 o'clock.
And you can go straight to Eventbrite, or you can pull that up on Facebook.
You can find that on Facebook. I believe NIFP, Northeast Indiana Friends of Public Education, did create an event for that. Okay. And there is a link to Eventbrite to get your tickets.
Okay, so you have that event. You can go back to the Journal-Gazette and read all the many things that they have published about education. You can also go to the State of Indiana's League of Women Voters website, which is www.lwvin, for League of Women Voters Indiana.org. And you will find a link to LWVIN Positions and Studies. And if you click on that link, there's a lot of information there. I was looking at it this afternoon. The League started studying education issues in Indiana back in 2016, and there has been a lot that has gone into those studies that has been shared on that website. So if you really want to get into it deeply, that is another way to do so. We have just a few minutes left. Do you have any other things for the good of the cause to talk about?
Well, I'd like to give a shout out to Karen Francisco, who's the editor of the editorial page at our Journal-Gazette, for all of her support over the years. She's had some excellent articles that explain privatization of schools and explains vouchers, charters, etc. And sometimes when we attend meetings like our annual meeting, which is going to be in Indianapolis this year, NIFB's annual meeting, we will meet other people from the state, and they'll say, you are so lucky to have someone like Karen on your side, and publishing articles to make the public aware. So we really appreciate her.
I just appreciate you having us here today. Anytime we can advocate for public schools, we will do that, and we love to. Our public schools are stronger than ever, and we are excited to be able to talk talk about them.
And your organization has a website?
Yes, we do. Blogspot.knifep.com.
Okay.
NEIFPE.
I know you have a Facebook
And we have a
page.
Facebook page. You can just search Northeast Indiana Friends of Public Education
right.
for that.
Okay. And this afternoon, before I came down here, I did add to the League of Women Voters of the Fort Wayne area Facebook page an article that Sheila Kennedy wrote the other day about education, which is good, and a couple of other items. And if you're interested in politics and different issues, we do try to post things on our Facebook page of general interest and of an educational interest, so that you can become a more informed voter, because that's what the League of Women Voters is all about. That being said, we've gone to a couple of rallies this past month on the courthouse green, where we have registered a number of high school students. If you have a high school student in your home who will be 18 by the time of the general election in November, they are eligible to register to vote. You can do that online, or you can go to voter registration in the Rousseau Center, but do ask your student if they want to register to vote, and I would encourage you as a mom, take your child to vote the first time they vote, because it's a really a great experience. And kids these days, they are awesome. They are committed, and they want to see some positive change in the world, and that's a good thing. Okay, so the League of Women Voters has a webpage, www.lwvfw.org, and our Facebook page. And I'd like to thank Ann and Kathy for visiting with me today.
Thank you for having us.
It's been good. It's been very interesting.
We appreciate it.
I'd also like to thank the Allen County Public Library and WELT. WELT Fort Wayne originates from the studios in the heart of Fort Wayne at the main branch of the Allen County Public Library, one of my favorite places in Fort Wayne. We're available 24 hours a day at 95.7 FM for the transmitter on the campus of IPFW, or worldwide online at tunein/WELT. WELT is funded in part by the Friends of the Public Library, who encourage all Allen County residents to come to any branch library and read a book. Thanks for listening. I'm Nancy McCammon Hansen, the convener of the Fort Wayne Area League of Women Voters, and this is Policy Matters.